Andre Calloway was 38 years old, and until that Tuesday afternoon, he believed he had a good marriage. He was a structural engineer, quiet and steady, the kind of man who fixed things without asking for credit. His wife Danielle was a rising PR executive, and Andre had never once resented that her career sparkled brighter than his. That day, he'd driven to her office with lunch and news that would change their lives. A national firm wanted to license the patent he'd spent 7 years building in secret. He was smiling when he stepped off the elevator. He was still smiling when he stopped outside the break room. Then he heard his own name, his wife's co-workers, laughing, calling him the placeholder husband, saying Danielle was just waiting for the right moment to leave, saying the paperwork was already handled. Andre stood frozen in that hallway, lunch bag still in his hand, and in that single moment, everything he thought he knew about his marriage came apart. What he did next would end her career, expose the man beside her, and cost her far more than she'd ever tried to take from him. But standing there, unseen, he hadn't decided anything yet. Not out loud. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The alarm hadn't gone off yet when Andre opened his eyes. 5:04 a.m. The room was dark and still. Danielle was asleep beside him, one arm curled under her pillow, her breathing slow and even. He watched her for a moment. Then he slipped out of bed without making a sound. That was his way. Quiet, careful, never disturbing anything that didn't need to be disturbed. The kitchen light hummed to life over the small table where he'd spread his work the night before. Blueprint, grid paper covered in his handwriting, photographs of cracked foundations and buckled walls, the kind of damage that happened in seconds but took decades to forget. He put the coffee on and sat down. The bracket system had started as a sketch in the margin of a legal pad 7 years ago. A simple question: why did low-income buildings always take the worst hit in an earthquake? Not because the ground shook harder under them, because retrofitting old structures was expensive. The brackets on the market cost too much to install at scale, so landlords skipped it, and when the earth moved, those buildings moved with it, and the people inside paid the price. Andre believed he'd figured out a better way. A bracket design that was cheaper to manufacture, faster to install, and just as strong. He'd been refining it in the early mornings, the late nights, the quiet hours that Danielle filled with galas and client dinners and calls from Preston that stretched past 10 o'clock. He'd funded it himself. Every material test, every consultation with a metallurgist, every filing fee, out of his own savings account, the one he'd had since before they were married. Danielle didn't ask about it much. The one time he'd really tried to explain it to her, over dinner about 2 years back, she'd cut a piece of her steak, set down her fork, and said, "Baby, I just don't want to watch you sink money into a hobby that'll never pay." She'd said it gently enough. That was the thing about Danielle. She could hand you something sharp and make it feel like a gift. He'd nodded and let it go. That was his way, too. By 6:30 the coffee was gone, and he'd marked 3 notations on the load distribution diagram. He stretched, rolled his shoulders, and started on Danielle's breakfast sandwich: fried egg, sharp cheddar, turkey sausage on a toasted brioche roll. Her favorite. He wrapped it in foil the way she liked, sealed the edge tight so it stayed warm. Their 9th anniversary was today. He'd made reservations at the Italian place on Meridian Street, the one with the low lighting and the handmade pasta she only let herself order twice a year. He'd bought her a card 2 days ago and written in it last night. Nothing poetic, just honest. 9 years and I'd pick you again. He meant it. Even with the gala last month, when she'd looked him up and down in the doorway and said, "You're wearing that blazer," with a kind of tired disappointment in her voice, like he was a recurring problem she hadn't solved yet. Even with the team lunch back in March, when she'd introduced him to her colleagues and added, almost automatically, "Andre's in engineering, just the day job, but he's great at it," as if the word just weren't sitting right there in the sentence like a stone in a shoe. Even after the cancelled date nights, 4 in the last 3 months, always Preston, always something urgent at the firm. He'd let those things settle quietly inside him, the way silt settles at the bottom of a jar. He didn't shake the jar. He wasn't built that way. But today felt different. His phone rang at 8:17 a.m. He almost didn't recognize the number. Chicago area code. He answered anyway. The voice on the other end belonged to a man named Gerald Fitch, Director of Procurement at Hargrove National Construction, one of the largest mid-rise builders in the country. "Mr. Calloway," the man said, "I'll be straightforward with you. Our engineering review team looked at your bracket system last week. They loved it. We want to talk licensing." Andre set down his pen. He asked the right questions, listened carefully, wrote down 3 numbers on the corner of his grid paper, and underlined them twice. By the time he hung up, his hand was resting flat on the table, and his heart was doing something loud and steady in his chest. 7 years. Every quiet morning. Every margin sketch. Every dollar out of his own pocket. A hobby that'll never pay. He looked at the number he'd written down. Then he looked at the foil-wrapped sandwich on the counter. He picked up the lunch bag, added a bottle of sparkling water, Danielle's brand, and grabbed his keys. He was going to tell her in person. He wanted to see her face. He wanted to stand in front of her, in whatever blazer he was wearing, and give her the news himself. The drive to her office building took 22 minutes. He found a parking spot on the street, checked his reflection once in the rearview mirror, and stepped out into the morning with the lunch bag in his hand. The lobby of Danielle's office building smelled like cold air and fresh flowers. A tall arrangement of white lilies sat on the reception desk, the kind of flowers that looked expensive because they were. Andre stepped inside and smiled at the receptionist. Young woman, maybe 25, with a headset around her neck and a visitor log open in front of her. "Andre Calloway," he said. "Here to see Danielle Calloway." "I'm her husband." The woman smiled back without hesitation. "Oh, of course. She's just finishing up a call." She gestured down the hallway with an open hand. "You can head back. The break room is the second left. She should be wrapping up any minute." "Thank you." He followed the hallway. The carpet was gray and plush. The walls were lined with framed campaign work, print ads, event photographs, headlines in clean fonts. Danielle's firm did good work. He'd always believed that. Even when she made it hard to say so, he could hear voices before he reached the break room. Women's voices, light and loose, the way people talk when they think nobody's listening. He slowed down. Then he heard his name. Not the way you hear your name called across a room. The other way. The way it sounds when it's being used as a punchline. Andre actually showed up to the Morrison dinner thinking she wanted him there. Laughter. Easy laughter. He stopped walking. He was maybe 6 feet from the doorway. Close enough to hear everything. Far enough that no one inside could see him. He stood still. "That man!" A different voice, higher pitched. "I mean, she's tried, but—" "She hasn't tried." That was Yolanda. Andre knew Yolanda's voice. He'd met her twice at firm events. Big laugh, big earrings, always standing near Danielle like a satellite in her orbit. "She's just waiting. She told me herself." Waiting for what? The right moment. Yolanda's voice dropped just slightly, the way it does when someone wants to sound like they're being careful, but actually wants to be heard. She said, and I'm quoting, "She's done. Has been for a while. She's just waiting for the right moment to leave." Silence. Then the clink of a spoon against a mug. "What about the house?" "Preston's already helping her figure all that out." A pause. "He's basically already helping her plan the next chapter. She's not worried." Someone said damn under their breath. "What does the husband even do again?" "Engineer." A beat. She calls him the placeholder husband. More laughter. Softer this time, but still there. Still resting in the air of that hallway, like smoke. Andre did not move. The lunch bag was still in his hand. He was aware of the weight of it. The foil-wrapped sandwich he'd made that morning, still warm. The sparkling water. Her brand. The card in his jacket pocket, with 9 years written into it in his own handwriting. Placeholder. He thought about the Morrison dinner. He'd worn the gray suit. He'd shaken hands and made small talk and laughed at the right moments. He'd thought the night went fine. He'd thought they went home fine. He had not been fine. He just hadn't known it. Preston's basically already helping her plan the next chapter. The voices inside shifted into something quieter, something about a client deadline. And Andre realized his feet had already made a decision his mind was still catching up to. He was moving, back down the hallway, slow and even, the way he always moved, the way he did everything, without disturbing anything that didn't need to be disturbed. He passed the reception desk. The young woman with the headset looked up. "She's still on that call?" he said, and his voice came out steady. He was almost surprised. "Looks like it's running long." The woman gave him an apologetic smile. "You're welcome to wait?" "That's all right." He lifted the lunch bag slightly. "I'll leave this for her. Can you make sure she gets it?" "Of course." He set the bag on the desk. He did not look back down the hallway. He pushed through the glass door and walked to the elevator and pressed the button for the parking garage. The doors opened. He stepped inside. He watched them close. His car was on level 2. He found it, unlocked it, and sat down in the driver's seat. He did not start the engine. The parking garage was quiet. Concrete columns, low yellow light, the distant sound of a car somewhere on level 3 pulling out of a space. Normal sounds, ordinary sounds. Andre set his keys on the center console and put both hands on the steering wheel. Placeholder husband. Done. Has been for a while. Preston's already helping her plan the next chapter. He stared straight ahead at the gray concrete wall in front of him. His jaw was tight. His hands were still on the wheel. And there was a moment, just one, where he pressed them down hard against it, like he needed something solid underneath him. Then he let out a long, slow breath, and he sat there, still, quiet, thinking. He sat in that parking garage for 11 minutes. He knew because he watched the clock on his dashboard the whole time. 12:04, 12:07, 12:15. The numbers changed, and he let them. And by the time 12:15 came around, something had settled in him. Not peace, not even close to peace, but something harder than the thing that had been sitting in his chest 2 minutes after he walked out of that building. He picked up his phone and called Danielle. She answered on the third ring. "Hey, babe." Her voice was easy, warm even. The same voice she used with clients. "Hey." He kept his eyes on the gray wall in front of him. "I got stuck at a job site. That drainage issue on the Kellerman project came back up. I'm not going to make it to your office." "Oh." A small pause, just small enough to be natural. "That's okay. I was actually running behind anyway. We can do dinner?" "Sure," he said. "I'll figure something out." "Okay. Love you." "Love you too." He hung up. He sat there one more second. Then he started the engine and drove home. The house was quiet in the middle of the afternoon. It always was when Danielle was at work. Andre moved through it slowly. He set his keys on the kitchen counter. He stood at the window over the sink for a moment, looking out at the backyard, the small patio, the 2 chairs they almost never sat in, the patch of grass that needed cutting. He made coffee he didn't really want, just to have something to do with his hands. Then he sat down at the kitchen table and let himself go back. He replayed the conversation the way he might replay a recording, clinically, carefully, the way he looked at blueprints for stress points. He didn't let himself feel it yet. He just listened to it. She's done. Has been for a while. That was painful. He filed it away. Preston's already helping her plan the next chapter. That was worse. He filed that away, too. But then he got to the part that made him go still. It hadn't seemed like the most important part when he was standing in that hallway. It came near the end, almost casual. One of the quieter voices, the one he didn't recognize. She'd been half laughing when she said it, like it was the funny part of the story. She already handled the loan paperwork. He won't even notice until it's done. He set his mug down. That wasn't heartbreak talk. That wasn't two friends gossiping about a marriage falling apart. That was a different kind of sentence entirely. That was a sentence about paperwork, about accounts, about something already in motion. He won't even notice until it's done. He sat with that for a long moment. Danielle had been using his name, maybe his credit, maybe something tied to the house, tied to his finances. He didn't know the shape of it yet, but his mind, the part of him that spent years doing load calculations and structural assessments, was already building the outline, already looking for where the weight was sitting, where the failure point was. This wasn't a marriage that was quietly falling apart. This was a plan. And if it was a plan, then it had a paper trail. He called Tobias at 4:17 in the afternoon. His brother picked up on the second ring. "Hey, what's up?" Andre didn't waste time. "I need you to pull copies of every financial account with my name on it. Joint accounts, anything I'm listed on, the house, everything. Starting today." Silence. Not a long silence. Tobias had always been quick, but long enough that Andre knew he'd understood the weight of the request without needing it explained. "How bad?" Tobias said. "I don't know yet. That's why I need the records." "What do you know?" "I know she already moved on something. I just don't know what." Another short pause. When Tobias spoke again, his voice had changed. Quieter, more deliberate. The lawyer voice. "Okay, I'll start pulling what I can tonight. Full picture might take a day or two, but I can get preliminary records on most of it pretty fast." He paused. "You confront her yet?" "No." "Good. Don't." His tone was firm. Not harsh, firm. The kind of firm that meant, "I mean this. You go home tonight. You act normal. Same as yesterday. Same as last week. You don't change anything. You don't give her any reason to accelerate whatever she's doing." "I know." "Andre." "I know, Tobias." A beat. "All right." His brother exhaled slowly. "I'll call you tomorrow. Maybe the day after, depending on what I find. But I'll move fast." "Thank you." "Don't thank me." A pause. "Just act normal tonight. Can you do that?" Andre looked around the kitchen. The quiet house. The two chairs through the window that nobody ever sat in. Danielle's coffee mug still on the drying rack from this morning, turned upside down. Exactly where she always left it. "Yeah," he said. "I can do that." Danielle came downstairs at 7:22, still in her robe, hair wrapped in a towel. She moved through the kitchen the way she always did in the morning. Unhurried, deliberate, like she was conserving energy for something later. Andre had already made the coffee. "Morning," she said, reaching past him for her mug. Not the one from the drying rack. A different one? Her work mug. The white one with the gold rim. She always switched to that one on days she had early meetings. "Morning." He smiled at her over his shoulder. Easy. Natural. The way he always did. "You want eggs?" She tilted her head like she was actually considering it. "Half an omelet?" "I can do that." She sat down at the table with her phone and her coffee while he worked. He kept his back to her for most of it, which helped. He cracked eggs against the edge of the pan and listened to the small sounds of her scrolling, the faint tap, tap of her thumb, the occasional quiet exhale. He set the plate in front of her. "Thank you, babe." She said it without looking up. He sat across from her with his own coffee and didn't say much. She didn't either. That was normal. Mornings had always been quiet like this between them. He used to think of it as comfortable. Now he was just glad for the excuse not to talk. "I've got some paperwork errands after work," she said after a few minutes, still looking at her phone. "Might be a little late." "No problem," he said. "I'll find something for dinner." She glanced up briefly and smiled at him. "You're the best." He smiled back. The day dragged. He was on a job site by 9, walking a foundation inspection on a commercial build in the east end of the city. He did the work. He wrote his notes. He answered his emails. He did all of it correctly, because he was the kind of man who did things correctly even when his mind was somewhere else entirely. But his mind was somewhere else entirely. He kept turning the number over. 6 weeks. If Tobias was right, and Tobias was usually right, then 6 weeks ago, Danielle had already been moving. 6 weeks ago, Andre had been drafting licensing language with the construction firm's legal team, feeling, for the first time in years, like the patient work was finally becoming something real. And at the same time, 6 weeks ago, something with his name on it had been opened and drained without him knowing. He didn't call Tobias. Tobias had said he'd reach out when he had something solid. Andre trusted that. He just had to wait. He wasn't good at waiting, but he'd learned to be. Tobias showed up at the house at 6:45, 40 minutes after Danielle had texted to say her errands were running long. He came in through the side door without knocking, he never knocked, and dropped a folder on the kitchen table like he was setting down something heavy. "Home equity loan," Tobias said. He didn't sit. He opened the folder and turned it toward Andre, tapping the top page. "Opened 6 weeks ago. $58,000 drawn against the house. Your signature's on the application." Andre looked at the page. His name, his address, his signature line, and a signature that looked, at a glance, close enough to pass. "That's not my signature," Andre said. "I know," Tobias said, "but let's confirm it." Andre went to the filing cabinet in the home office. He kept everything: tax returns, contractor licenses, insurance documents going back years. He pulled a folder and found a mortgage refinance form from 2019, signed in his own hand. He brought it back to the kitchen and laid it next to the loan document. They both looked. The differences weren't dramatic, but they were there, once you knew to look. The loop on the C in Callaway. The way his real signature always ended with a sharp downward pull, the loan document's version trailed off soft, like whoever wrote it had run out of confidence at the last second. "That's not mine," Andre said again, quietly. Tobias nodded. "The funds got routed into the joint savings account, the one that still has both your names on it." He flipped to the next page. "Balance 6 weeks ago was around 64,000. Current balance is 900 and change." The kitchen was very still. "She's been moving it out in pieces," Tobias said. "Transfers, small enough not to trip an automatic flag, consistent enough to be deliberate." Andre didn't say anything for a moment. He just looked at the numbers on the page. "Keep digging," he finally said. "I want to know everything before we do anything. Don't contact the bank. Don't alert anybody." Tobias looked at him steadily. "You sure?" "I want the full scope." He closed the folder. "She's not done yet, which means this isn't the whole picture." That night, Andre lay in the dark beside Danielle and stared at the ceiling. She was asleep within minutes. She always slept well. He didn't move. He just thought. He went back through the last 2 months. Every offhand mention, every casual reference to errands, to paperwork, to just handling some things. And he laid them out in order, one by one, the way he'd lay load points on a diagram. The dinner was a good one. Danielle had cooked. Pan-seared salmon with roasted vegetables, a bottle of white wine already open on the counter. She did this sometimes, appearing in the kitchen after work with grocery bags, and a certain kind of energy, the performance of domestic warmth that Andre had once found genuinely touching. He still noticed it. He just noticed it differently now. He set the table. She plated the food. They sat down. "This is good," he said, meaning the salmon. The trick is to let the pan get really hot first, she said. Most people rush it. They talked about small things for a while. Her commute, a client presentation she had coming up. He told her about the foundation inspection and a minor drainage issue they'd flagged. She nodded at the right moments and refilled her wine. Then, halfway through her second glass, she said it. I was thinking about your patent thing. Casual. Easy. Like she'd just happened to think of it. Have you talked to anyone about structuring the licensing deal? Andre kept cutting his salmon. Still in discussion. Right, but structurally. She turned her fork in a small circle. Like, from a tax standpoint. Because if you run it through the right entity, you can shield a lot of the income. My friend Karen's husband did something similar last year. Saved them a significant amount. I'll have to look into that, he said. She leaned forward slightly. Not much, just enough. I actually think a joint LLC might make the most sense, given that we file jointly anyway. It simplifies everything. Liability, income reporting, and it just makes more sense to do it together, you know? We're a unit. We're a unit. He looked up at her. She was looking at him with a small, patient smile, like she was helping him. I'd want my patent attorney to look at it first, he said. Of course, she nodded. I'm just saying it's worth exploring. It's a cleaner way to do it. And honestly, it protects you better if there's ever any dispute down the line. He picked up his wine glass. I'll talk to him this week. She sat back again. I just want to make sure you're taken care of. He smiled at her. I know you do. He waited until she was upstairs before he called Tobias. He stepped out onto the back porch and stood in the dark, one hand in his jacket pocket, voice low. She brought up the LLC tonight, he said. A short pause on the other end. What exactly did she say? He repeated it, the tax angle, the joint filing. It simplifies everything. Tobias listened without interrupting. Okay, Tobias said when he finished. So here's what that actually means. His voice shifted into the flat, precise tone it got when he was working. If the licensing deal closes under a joint LLC, even one formed after the patent was filed, it creates a legal argument that the proceeds from that patent are shared marital assets. The patent itself might hold, depending on how the original filing reads, but the license revenue, the deal value, the royalties, all of that becomes potentially subject to division. Andre was quiet for a moment. Even if I filed it before the LLC existed, even then, because you'd be voluntarily routing your sole asset through a shared entity. In a divorce, her attorney would argue that constitutes commingling, and depending on the judge, Tobias let that sit. The backyard was dark. The neighbor's dog was barking 2 houses down, then stopped. Preston's business, Andre said. What do you know about it? I pulled some things. Tobias paused. His consulting firm's in trouble, behind on lease payments for the office space, and there's a creditor judgment filed against the LLC from earlier this year. He needs cash. Real cash, soon. Andre stood with that for a moment. The loan, the drained account. And now this, a push to bring his patent licensing deal under a shared structure, right before it was about to close, right when it was about to be worth something real. He saw the whole shape of it now. She didn't just want to leave. She'd never cared about the patent. Not once in 7 years had she asked him anything real about it, but she'd understood somehow that it was about to matter. And she'd been moving, systematically and quietly, to make sure that when she walked out, she took as much of it with her as possible. Not because she wanted it, because he did. That was the part that settled in him cold. She wasn't just leaving. She was making sure he couldn't follow. I need to protect the patent before anything else moves, Andre said. Before the LLC, before the divorce filings, before any of it. Agreed, Tobias said. I'll need to see the original filing document, everything from when you first applied. Andre thought about it. He had copies, but there was someone who had the originals. I'll get them, he said. He went back inside, washed his hands at the kitchen sink, and picked up his phone again. He scrolled to Grandma Odessa and pressed call. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, Grandma," he said. "I'm okay. I was wondering, can I come by Sunday? I just need to talk something through." Odessa Calloway's house smelled like it always did: cornbread and something slow cooking, wood polish on old furniture, and the faint trace of the lavender sachets she kept in every closet. Andre had been coming here since he was 7 years old. The smell alone used to make his shoulders drop. Today it didn't. She met him at the door before he could knock, which she always did, because she always heard the car. She looked at him, one full, unhurried look, the kind that went past his face and checked something deeper. "Come in," she said, and nothing else. He followed her into the kitchen. The table was already set for two, a pot of collard greens on the stove, a pan of cornbread cooling on the rack. She moved with the careful steadiness of a woman in her late 70s who refused to be slowed down by it. He sat down. She put a glass of sweet tea in front of him without asking. "You hungry?" she said. "I can wait." She looked at him again. Then she pulled out the chair across from him and sat down and folded her hands on the table. "Tell me," she said. He hadn't planned to start with Yolanda and the break room, but that was where it began. So that was where he started. He told her everything. The lunch bag in his hand, his own name drifting out through that break room door, the placeholder husband, the way he'd walked back to the elevator because his legs were moving before his brain caught up, sitting in the parking garage with the engine off. Then, the loan, Tobias's call, the signature that wasn't his, compared side by side with documents he knew he'd actually signed. The difference plain even to an untrained eye. Then dinner 3 nights ago. Danielle's fork turning in that small circle. We're a unit. The smile she'd given him like she was doing him a favor. Odessa didn't move, didn't click her tongue or shake her head. She just listened, her hands still folded, her eyes on his face. When he finished, the kitchen was quiet except for the low simmer of the greens. "How long do you think she's been planning it?" Odessa asked. "At least since the loan. 6 weeks. Maybe longer." She looked down at her hands for a moment. Then she said, "Did I ever tell you what I asked you to do when you first filed that patent?" Andre frowned. "You were there when I told you about it. You said—" "I said I was proud of you." She nodded once. "And then I told you to make sure your name was the only name on it, and on the house." She paused. "Do you remember that?" He did, now that she said it. It had been 2019. He'd come over for Sunday dinner, same as always, and told her about the application. She'd listened to all of it, and at the end she'd said, very simply, "Make sure your name is on it. Just yours. Don't let anybody else put their hands on it." He'd thought she was just being careful, the way old people were careful. He hadn't asked why. "I kept copies," she said. "The originals." She got up from the table and walked down the short hallway to her bedroom. He heard a drawer open, not the soft slide of a regular drawer, but the heavier pull of something with weight to it. A lock disengaging. She came back with a manila folder held with both hands, the way you'd carry something you didn't want to drop. She set it down in front of him. He opened it slowly. The patent application paperwork was on top. His name, his address, sole inventor. The date, March 2019. Notarized. Beneath it, the deed to the house. His name alone. Filed before the joint account had even existed. Before any LLC had ever been discussed. Before any of this. He stared at the pages. "I filed those myself," Odessa said, settling back into her chair. "I drove down to that office, and I made copies, and I brought them home, and I put them in that drawer." She said it flatly, without pride, like it was just a thing she'd done because it needed doing. "I didn't know if you'd ever need them. I hoped you wouldn't." Andre looked up at her. "You did this in 2019, he said. "I did." Because of Danielle. She met his eyes. I never said a bad word about that woman to you. You know that. I know. But I paid attention. She pressed her lips together briefly. And I made sure. He looked back down at the pages. The notary stamp. The date. His name, clean and singular and undeniable, sitting there through every scheme that had come after it. The forged loan hadn't changed this. The drained account hadn't touched this. The LLC push, that carefully laid trap she'd been steering him toward over salmon and white wine, hadn't come close to this. None of it had. After a while, Odessa stood up and went to plate the food. Andre stayed at the table, the folder open in front of him. You eat first, she said. Then you pack those up. He nodded. Yes, ma'am, he said quietly. They ate. She didn't bring it up again over dinner, and he didn't either. They talked about his cousin Marcus and the new job he'd taken, and whether the cornbread had too much sugar in it this time. Odessa said it didn't. Andre said it might. She laughed. It was a short, real laugh, the kind that didn't need anything around it. After dinner, he washed the dishes while she put away the food, same as it had always been. Then he went back to the table, closed the folder, and tucked it carefully into the messenger bag he'd brought. He stood at the front door with his jacket on and the bag over his shoulder. Odessa stood a few feet away, arms loosely crossed, watching him. Thank you, he said. The word felt too small, but he meant it in every way it could mean. She waved her hand, a short, quiet gesture. Don't make it a thing. You call your brother tonight, she said, and you don't sign anything. You hear me? I hear you. She reached up and put her hand flat against the side of his face for just a moment. Then she dropped it and opened the door. He walked out into the cool evening air, bag over his shoulder, and got into his car. The week moved slowly. Andre got up every morning at the same time, made coffee, packed his bag, kissed Danielle on the cheek before she left for work, said, "Have a good day," like he meant it. He did mean it, in a way. He meant, go. Act normal. Don't change anything. Because if she changed anything, it would be harder to finish what had already started. He was very good at patient. He'd spent 7 years proving that. The documents went to Tobias in pieces. The folder from Odessa's drawer first, hand-delivered on Monday evening in the parking lot of a hardware store 2 miles from Tobias's office. Andre handed it through the car window without getting out. Tobias opened the folder, scanned the top page, and nodded once. This predates everything, he said. By years. Tobias looked up. She didn't know about this. She never asked. Andre's voice was level. She never thought she needed to. Tobias closed the folder and set it carefully on the passenger seat. Give me the rest of the week. At home, nothing changed on the surface. Wednesday night, Danielle brought up the refinance again. They were on the couch after dinner, her legs folded under her, a glass of wine in her hand. She made it sound easy, casual. I talked to the mortgage guy again, she said. He said if we sign by the end of the month, we lock in the lower rate. Andre nodded slowly, like he was thinking it over. I've just been slammed at the site. 2 inspections this week and the county report is due Friday. It doesn't take long. It's just a signature. I know, he said. Let me get past Friday. She smiled at him, patient, warm. The kind of smile that didn't reach anywhere it was supposed to reach. Of course, she said. No rush. He smiled back. She went back to her phone. He looked at the television and didn't see anything on it. Thursday afternoon, Tobias called. Andre stepped out of a site meeting, walked to the far end of the parking lot, and answered. Found something, Tobias said. Talk to me. The shared tablet, the one you said sits on the kitchen counter. Andre went still. What about it? I need you to go home and check the Messages app. Don't touch anything. Don't delete anything. Just look at the conversation thread under Preston's name and take a photo of the screen. That evening, Andre waited until Danielle was in the shower. He picked up the tablet from the counter, opened the messages, and found Preston's name near the top. The thread was long. He didn't read all of it. He didn't need to. The one Tobias had flagged was dated 5 weeks ago, 2 days after the loan paperwork would have been filed. Preston had written, "Once the loan clears, we're cushioned for at least 6 months. Don't stress." And Danielle had written back, "I know. Just keep it clean on your end." Andre took the photo. He set the tablet back exactly where it had been. He stood in the kitchen for a moment with his phone in his hand, listening to the water still running down the hall. Then he put the phone in his pocket and started washing the dinner dishes. Tobias came by Friday evening while Danielle was at a client dinner. He spread the documents across Andre's dining room table in order. First, the home equity loan. Danielle's forged signature, dated 6 weeks ago, with the wire transfer record underneath it. Second, the joint account statements, deposits in, steady withdrawals out, a balance that had dropped by nearly $40,000 in less than 2 months. Third, Odessa's documents, the deed, the patent filing, both in Andre's name alone, both predating anything Danielle had tried to build on top of them. Fourth, the LLC correspondence, emails Danielle had sent to a business formation service, listing both their names, dated 3 weeks ago. Fifth, the screenshot from the tablet. Once the loan clears, we're cushioned. Keep it clean on your end. Sixth, Yolanda. Tobias had written up a timeline. Dates, details, everything Yolanda had said in that break room mapped against the financial records. It all fit. The affair wasn't separate from the scheme. It was the reason for the scheme. Preston needed the money. Danielle needed Preston. And Andre had the asset neither of them had ever taken seriously enough to protect, until now. Tobias tapped the corner of the last page. This is everything. It's clean. It's complete. Andre looked at the table for a long moment. 6 documents, 7 years of his life, 9 years of a marriage. All of it, finally, in one place. "Okay," he said. Tobias began to carefully reorganize the pages into a single folder. Andre watched him, already knowing what the next step was. Saturday morning, Andre called Danielle's office from his cell phone. The receptionist answered. He gave his name, kept his voice easy. "I wanted to schedule a meeting sometime next week," he said. "With Danielle. I want to come in and finalize the refinance paperwork." He paused. "In person. I think it'd be better that way." "Of course, Mr. Calloway. Let me check her calendar." He waited. "How does Tuesday at noon work?" "Tuesday at noon is perfect," he said. The elevator opened on the 4th floor at 5 minutes to noon. Andre stepped out with the folder tucked under his arm and his jacket buttoned. He'd worn the gray one. The one Danielle had told him, twice, looked too plain for professional settings. He'd pressed it himself that morning. The receptionist smiled when she saw him. "Mr. Calloway, I'll let Danielle know you're here." "No rush," he said. He stood in the lobby and looked around. The office was all clean lines and muted colors, framed campaign work on the walls, industry awards on a shelf near the window, everything polished, everything intentional. Danielle had built this place into part of her identity. He could see her in every detail of it. She appeared at the far end of the hall a minute later, heels quiet on the carpet, wearing the navy dress she saved for client meetings. She smiled when she saw him. Warm, practiced, the same smile from the couch on Wednesday night. "Hey, you." She kissed him on the cheek. Her hand rested briefly on his arm. "Come on back. I set us up in the conference room." He followed her. Preston was already inside. He was standing near the window with his jacket on and his arms loose, the posture of a man who had decided in advance that this was going to go well. He smiled when Andre walked in. Big, easy, the kind of smile that was mostly teeth. "Andre!" He extended his hand. "Good to finally sit down like." Andre shook it. "Preston." They sat. Danielle at the head of the table, Preston to her left. Andre directly across. The folder went on the table in front of him. He rested one hand flat on top of it and looked at them both. Danielle was still smiling, a pen already in her fingers. "So, ready to get this done?" "Almost," Andre said. He opened the folder. He set the first page on the table and slid it toward her. "Home equity loan," he said. "Opened 6 weeks ago. Your name and mine." He tapped the signature line. "That's not my signature." Danielle's eyes dropped to the page. Something moved across her face, fast, almost invisible. And then the smile came back, smaller. "Andre." "Second." He placed the bank statements in front of her. "Joint account. $38,000 withdrawn over 7 weeks. He paused, starting the day after the loan funded. Preston shifted in his chair. "There's clearly been some..." "Third." Andre set down the LLC emails. "Formation inquiry. Both our names. Sent 3 weeks ago to a business service. Filed the same week you started pushing me to move the licensing deal." The pen in Danielle's hand had stopped moving. It was just resting between her fingers now, not doing anything. "And fourth," he placed Odessa's documents on top. The deed first, then the patent filing. Both clean, both clear, both dated years before any of this had started. The house. The patent. Both filed solely in my name. Both predating the loan, the LLC, and the licensing conversation by several years. He let that sit for a moment. The room was quiet. Danielle was looking at the deed. Her jaw was tight. "You've known," she said. It wasn't a question. "For a while," he said. Preston leaned forward and his voice came out smoother, calculated. "Look, Andre, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding about the nature of..." "There's no misunderstanding." Andre didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "The managing partner has already been informed of the forged signature. My brother's firm submitted the documentation this morning." The color left Danielle's face. Not gradually, all at once, like a light going off behind her eyes. "The managing partner," she repeated. "Yes." She set the pen down. Preston sat back slowly. The big, easy smile was completely gone now. He looked at the documents on the table the way a person looks at something they can't pick up and move. Danielle pressed her fingers flat against the tabletop. "Andre?" Her voice had changed. The warmth was stripped out of it. What was underneath wasn't anger. It was something more brittle than that. "You could have just talked to me." He looked at her steadily. "You could have just talked to me," he said. She had no answer for that. He didn't wait for one. He gathered the documents one by one, in the same order he'd laid them down, and placed them back in the folder. He smoothed the edge of the cover and stood up. Danielle hadn't moved. Preston was staring at the table. Andre buttoned his jacket, picked up the folder, and walked to the door. He didn't slam it. He didn't pause for effect. He just opened it and walked through it, the same way he'd walked into every difficult thing in his life, quietly, without looking back. The carpet in the hallway was soft under his shoes. The lobby was bright. The elevator opened immediately when he pressed the button. He stepped in. The doors slid closed behind him. The call came at 8:47 in the morning. Andre was at his desk when his phone buzzed. Tobias. He picked up on the second ring. "It's done," Tobias said. Gerald Marsh called her in at 8. She was out of the building by 9:30. Andre set down his coffee. "Okay. Fraud referral goes to the bank today. The forgery is clean-cut, Andre. There's no gray area for anyone to argue their way around." A pause. "She's done in this industry. That kind of record follows a person." Andre didn't say anything for a moment. He looked out the window at the street below. A delivery truck was idling at the curb. A woman walked past with a stroller. Everything completely ordinary. "Okay," he said again. "Thanks, Tobias." He found out about Preston through a 2-line text from Tobias 2 days later. Locke's backers pulled out. Both of them. His firm's finished. Thought you'd want to know. Andre read it once, set his phone face down on the counter, and went back to making dinner. It didn't feel like victory. It just felt like a door closing in another room. Preston had overextended himself for years, apparently. That was what Tobias said when they talked that evening, that the man's books had been bleeding quietly for a long time, that Danielle had been the plan, not the relationship. The money from the equity loan, the cut of the licensing deal, a fresh financial foundation built entirely on Andre's name. He needed her to pull it off, Tobias said, and she needed him to feel like it was worth doing. Andre thought about the handshake in that conference room, the easy smile, the loose posture, the voice that came out smooth, even when the walls were falling in. He didn't feel angry about it. He'd moved past angry somewhere around the third week of acting normal at the breakfast table. What he felt now was something closer to clarity. The licensing call came on a Thursday. His patent attorney, a quiet and deliberate man named Carroll, delivered the news the way he delivered everything, in plain, exact language, with no unnecessary decoration. "The deal closed this morning," Carroll said, "solely under your name, as filed. The upfront payment will hit your account within 5 business days." Andre was sitting on the porch steps when he took the call. His sleeves were rolled up. The afternoon light was long and golden across the yard. "Thank you, Carroll." "Congratulations, Mr. Calloway. 7 years is a long time to carry something like this." "It is," Andre said. "It really is." He sat on the steps for a while after he hung up. He didn't call anyone. He just sat there with his forearms on his knees and breathed the late afternoon air and let it be real. 7 years. While she called it a hobby that would never pay, he had been filing, refiling, saving, adjusting, waiting, while she winced at his jacket and canceled plans and built an exit strategy with another man. He had been doing the quiet, unglamorous, necessary work. He thought about Odessa's face when he told her the deal had gone through. He'd call her tonight. Danielle was out of the house within the week. She took what was hers, her clothes, her shoes, the framed art she'd picked out, the good dishes she'd registered for before they got married. She left on a Wednesday afternoon while Andre was at the office, which was what they'd agreed to. He hadn't asked where she was going. She hadn't offered. He came home that evening to a house that felt subtracted, certain shelves bare, gaps where things used to be, the closet on her side standing open and empty. He stood in the bedroom doorway for a long moment. Then he went to the kitchen and made himself a sandwich, and he ate it standing at the counter. And that was that. The divorce paperwork arrived on a Friday morning. Andre sat down at the kitchen table with it, a mug of coffee at his elbow, the window behind him letting in a flat, gray morning light. He went through it page by page, slowly, the way he read everything, carefully, without skipping. There was nothing surprising in it. Tobias had made sure of that weeks ago. The house stayed. The patent stayed. The licensing income stayed. The forged loan was being handled separately, through the bank's legal process, and that had nothing to do with the divorce. What she'd tried to take, she didn't get. What she'd already had, she'd thrown away herself. He reached the signature line on the last page and held his pen over it for a moment. Not because he was hesitating. He wasn't hesitating. He was just sitting with the weight of 9 years and letting it exist one last time before he set it down for good. Then he signed his name. He put the pen down. He pulled the stack of papers together, tapped them even against the table, and clipped them. Outside, a car passed on the street. The coffee was still warm. He picked it up and drank. The bracket went in clean. Andre watched from the edge of the platform as the crew set the third unit into the steel frame, lining it up with the anchor bolts he'd spec'd himself. The foreman called something out. 2 workers adjusted their grip. The bracket seated perfectly, exactly the way it was supposed to. Exactly the way he'd designed it to 7 years ago at a desk in a house that was still dark at 5 in the morning. He had watched this same installation happen in Sacramento last spring, in Phoenix last fall. Now here, outside of Dallas, on a clear Thursday morning with a hard blue sky and the smell of concrete dust hanging in the air. 3 states, 14 buildings. More on the way. He pulled his hard hat down a half-inch against the wind and kept watching. Odessa arrived at noon. She pulled up in her old silver Buick, parked where the site manager pointed, and climbed out with a canvas bag hanging from each arm. She was wearing her good Sunday hat, the cream-colored one with the small brim, even though it was Thursday, even though they were eating on a folding table in the site trailer. That was Odessa. When something mattered, she dressed for it. Andre met her at the trailer door and took one of the bags. "Don't drop that one," she said. "It's got the sweet potato pie." "Yes, ma'am." Inside, she unpacked everything slowly and deliberately. 2 containers of rice and chicken, a sleeve of crackers, the pie wrapped in foil, 2 cans of lemonade. She arranged it like she was setting a proper table. Andre watched her and didn't rush her. He never rushed Odessa. When she was satisfied, she sat down across from him and looked at him the way she always did, straight on, with those dark, calm eyes that missed nothing. "Show me," she said. He turned toward the window. Out across the site, the crew was still working. You could see the frame clearly from here, the brackets catching the midday light, where the steel met the anchor points. Odessa looked for a long moment without speaking. "That's your work," she said quietly. "Yes, ma'am. That's mine." She nodded once, like that settled something, and then she opened the container of rice and pushed it toward him. They ate without rushing. She asked about the Dallas team, and he told her. She asked about Carroll, his patent attorney, and he gave her the short version. 3 new licensing inquiries already sitting in Carroll's inbox, 2 of them from firms he'd never heard of before the deal went public. She listened the way she always listened, without interrupting, without letting her eyes drift. At some point, she said, simply, "I'm proud of you, baby." Andre put his fork down. He wasn't a man who got emotional easily. Never had been. But he sat with those words for a moment before he answered. "I couldn't have done it without what you had in that drawer," he said. "You would have found another way." She picked up her lemonade. "But I'm glad you didn't have to." He had heard about Danielle through Tobias, not long after the divorce finalized. The fraud record had done exactly what Tobias said it would. Her firm hadn't been the only door that closed. The referral made it into industry channels, the way those things do in small professional circles where everyone knows someone who knows someone. She'd tried 2 other firms. Neither had followed through after the background check. Last Tobias had heard, she was doing freelance work outside her field entirely, something unrelated to PR or client relations. Andre hadn't asked for updates after that. He didn't need them. Preston had left the state 6 months ago. His consulting firm had folded fast once the backers walked, and the story of why they walked had spread the same way it always does, quietly, completely, and without mercy. Last anyone heard, he'd relocated somewhere in the southeast, alone. No partner, no business, no fresh start waiting for him. Andre thought about all of this for exactly as long as it took to think it, and then he let it go. It wasn't satisfaction. It wasn't anything he'd chased. It was just what happened when a structure is built wrong from the start. Eventually, it fails on its own. After lunch, Odessa sat in the trailer reading a magazine while Andre stepped back outside with his tablet. He stood at the edge of the platform again. Below, the crew was moving to the next anchor point, unhurried, working with the kind of steady rhythm that meant they knew what they were doing. He watched them for a moment. Then he looked down at the screen. The new contract was already open. 22 buildings, 2 counties, one of the largest public infrastructure bids he'd ever seen his name attached to. He read through it once, slowly, the way he read everything. Then he pulled up the signature field. The site noise was everywhere around him. The hum of equipment, the clang of metal on metal. A foreman calling out down the line. The sky was still hard and blue and wide open. Andre signed his name. He tucked the tablet under his arm, took one long look out across the site, and walked forward. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.